Ivan the Terrible accidentally killed his eldest son, who had been groomed to replace him, leaving his second eldest son, Fyodor, as his heir. And Fyodor, who took over in 1584, had little interest in politics, so his brother-in-law Boris Godunov ruled as regent. This lasted until Fyodor died in 1598, and without an heir, the Rurikid dynasty came to an end. The Zemsky Sobor, a parliament of nobility and clergy, decided to appoint Boris as Tsar, but he faced opposition from the Romanov family. This was because Ivan the Terrible had married into their family, but they were just deported to faraway places within Russia. However, just a couple of years into Boris's rule, a Peruvian volcano erupted, world temperatures dropped, and crops around the world failed. So from 1601 to 1603, Russia was struck by incredibly poor harvests, and it's estimated by some around a third of the population died in the ensuing famines. Plus, many of the peasants began to flock to Moscow, bandits and Cossacks began to raid in increasing numbers, and many saw Boris as a usurper. So stories emerged that Fyodor's younger brother Dmitri had survived, but he had in fact died of stab wounds when he was just 8 years old, but no one knows who killed him. And 3 men in total would claim to be this third son of Ivan the Terrible, or the 3 false Dmitris. Beginning in 1603 in Poland, false Dmitri I told stories about his time in the Russian court, and gained supporters amongst the Polish nobility and even the king Sigismund III Vasa. This false Dmitri converted to Roman Catholicism to gain support of the papacy, and some Russian boyars also pledged their support to him. So in 1605, with a small army of mercenaries, he entered Russia, and was joined by Boris's enemies like the Cossacks. Then, as this false Dmitri captured Chernigov, Boris died, and his young son Fyodor II succeeded him. But his successor had very little support, and in just a couple of months he was captured and killed by boyars, allowing false Dmitri to enter Moscow in June unopposed. He was crowned Tsar, pardoned powerful nobles like the Romanovs, and introduced reforms to appease the peasantry. However, news of his conversion to Catholicism angered the population, and so too did the foreign troops in the city. So a leading boyar named Prince Vasily Shuisky gathered support, and in 1606 stormed the Kremlin and killed the Tsar, taking the title for himself. But he too had little support, and the Polish just found another man claiming to be Dmitri, and supported another invasion of Russia. And the Russians could do very little to stop this second invasion force, as peasants had risen up under Bolotnikov. So in 1609 the Russians agreed to hand land over to the Swedish in exchange for military support. However, this just prompted King Sigismund of Poland to declare war on the Russians himself. Then he besieged Smolensk and crushed a relief force at Klashino. So to avoid another invasion and further uprisings, a group of 7 powerful boyars forced Vasily to abdicate. But this time the false Dmitri was not crowned Tsar. Instead, Sigismund's son Vladislav became Tsar in 1610, in exchange for freedoms granted to the Orthodox Church and nobility. So this could have united Poland, Lithuania and Russia, but it did not last long. This is because Sigismund intended to take the throne for himself and convert the population to Catholicism. Plus, the Swedish turned to fight the Russians in the Ingrian War, and even produced their own false Dmitri to install. But this third false Dmitri was captured and executed in 1612, yet the war with Sweden continued for a few more years. So by now you had Cossacks, Tartars and brigands raiding the countrysides, the Swedes occupying the Baltic region, Polish in the Kremlin, no clear Tsar and peasant uprisings. And in 1611, to quell rebellions in Moscow, the Polish killed around 8,000 people and set fire to the city, but they still maintained a presence in the Kremlin. And their actions encouraged many Russians to join militias and besiege the Kremlin, but they suffered from infighting. For instance, there was Marina Minishek. Now she was the former wife of both false Dmitri I and false Dmitri II, and she had remarried a Cossack named Ivan Zarutsky, and she persuaded this Cossack to kill the head of the militia, the governor of Ryazan, so she could take over and install her own son as Tsar. So with so much infighting the Polish held out, but in 1612 they began to mutiny over unpaid wages. And outside of Moscow, Kuzma Minin and Dmitry Pozotsky organised a new militia and forced the remaining Polish to surrender in November 1612, just before Sigismund's relief column made it to the city. So with the Polish gone, the Zemsky Sobor elected Michael Romanov as Tsar, ending the time of troubles, and the Romanov dynasty would go on to rule for centuries.